Welcome to another edition of Maverick University. I'm your host, David Hallberg, and we have a special guest with us, one of our missionaries, a brother going to the Middle East. And so wanted to have a conversation with him. Brother, you gave a good lesson the other day in our Bible college to our Bible college students as a part of the missions conference. And with your history, you spent many years pastoring here in the United States. 18 years?
Yes, sir. 18 years pastoring, 7 years as an associate pastor as well.
So in that span of time, you become acquainted to life in the United States, ministry in the United States, and now you're making a very unique transition to missions, but beside that, missions in the Middle East area.
That's correct.
And you brought some insights that I thought were especially helpful, and I thought could be helpful if we could broadcast this to others who are missionaries or pastors. And you kind of took a perspective of, these are the things I wish I had known when I was a pastor.
Exactly.
And these are the things that every missionary should know, because this is what a pastor is thinking. And so that's what I want to do.
I would preface some of these. I have them written in a book, so I'll reference that book if that's okay. But I would preface this by saying what I said in chapel the other day. There were some pastors in the room.
Sure.
And I wouldn't want to come across as I know something you don't know, or let me tell you how it is.
Sure.
But just addressing pastoral students and missionary prospects.
Sure.
That these are some things I wish that I had focused on in a better way as a pastor looking at missions, and then now as someone that is on mission deputation, speaking to pastors. And my peers are pastors. For the last 25 years, that's been the ministry. My wife and I have been in the pastoral ministry, and they're my peers, and they're my best of friends.
Sure.
And many of them will ask questions or bounce things off of us sometime about, hey, what have you seen in mission conferences? And so I never try to come across it as a know-it-all or someone who is lecturing others, but at your request, we'll talk about this, certainly.
Well, I thought it was very good, because you're right. You don't want to talk down to anybody. These are your peers, and these are newer thoughts that you've had yourself.
Exactly.
And kind of come to some realization of some realities. And so a lot of this, I'm sure, is based on biblical principle.
Yes, sir.
But there's absolute practical applications for some of this. So if you could just kind of give us what some of these thoughts were.
Some things, and what I did is I just sat down and wrote some things out. I didn't spend a lot of time at this, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. I just wrote down some things. Dear Pastor, if I could go back and pastor again, what are some things that I would do differently this time in respect to missions? I can recall as I talked to my dad. My dad is a pastor, and I was talking with him early in the actually pre-deputation. I was still pastoring at this time. And I mentioned to him one day I was trying to reach pastors on the phone, making phone calls, and I said, I'm having a difficult time reaching pastors on the phone. And so my dad said something along these lines. He said, son, there's a principle in the Bible that you reap and you sow. And we use that principle to scold people sometimes. That if you sow to the flesh, you'll of the flesh reap corruption. Sure. But he said the other side of that is that if you sow to the Spirit, you'll reap life everlasting. And so the good things that we sow, we reap as well. And sometimes we forget that. And his word was this: every time I call you, you and your son, or you and your church, you're working on a mission project, or you're headed to on a mission trip, or you're saving money, or you're building something for a missionary, or a missionary is there, or you're doing a mission conference, because that was our heart in the pastorate. We love missions and we love missionaries, and I have some dear friends that are missionaries on the mission field, and we try to communicate with them, try to text them, try to send emails to them. But that being said, I would do some things differently now, even if I were to go back. And so I wrote out some simple statements. One of them is, Dear Pastor, I wish I had communicated more efficiently or more effectively. It's easy to, as being a pastor, you have as a matter of fact, I wrote this as one of them: Dear Pastor, I wish I had not hidden behind a secretary and let her run defense for me. And I know that's that's maybe in your face a little bit.
Yeah.
But the secretary is answering the phone at the church, and she's taking the messages. And when the missionary is calling, it's easy to get 3 or 4 or 5 phone calls behind, and then they just sit there on your desk. Because honestly, I want to help every missionary that came through. When a missionary would come through, I would watch their video or their presentation, and I would feel a burden for that. That's what I want my heart to be. So every missionary that calls us, I can't support. And it's hard to say no. It's hard to say, no, I can't have you to come, or no, if they come, no, we don't have the funds to support you right now. And so sometimes it's easier to just ignore it. If I ignore this, missionaries are not a problem, but if I ignore the problem, it will go away. Or if I ignore the phone call, I don't have to worry about it. On this side, with making phone calls for deputation work, I would rather a pastor just call me back and say, hey brother, we can't have anyone right now. I would rather have a no than a nothing. Just be up front. So I wish I had communicated more efficiently with missionaries who were on deputation, and even with our missionaries who were on the field.
Well, I could be kind of empathetic with the pastor's position there, where he's got a missionary calling, and the answer is no, and no one wants to say no to another servant of God who's going to try and do a work for God somewhere else. I mean, you feel like a heel,
yes,
I imagine, and it's just easier not to make the phone call than
yes,
to make the phone call and sound calloused or heartless, or
yes, sir,
just by saying no. That's challenging.
If there were another way to do deputation, I would sign up for it. Other than making phone calls.
Yes, sir.
I shared this with the mission students earlier this week, that having been on one side of the desk as a pastor, and you're the final authority, if you will, on some things. Like, we will have this missionary, or we won't have this missionary to come in. Or we will do this program, or we won't do that program. But we will, whatever the situation is. And it's one thing to call the shots. I'm an independent, fundamental, Bible-believing, fire-breathing, smoke out the ears, King James, all those things that we say and we believe, and you have to have that in your heart. Some grit in your craw. But when you come to the other side of the table, and you're no longer the one who is making the decision, you're asking.
Yeah.
Instead of telling.
And that's hard.
You're asking. It's very humbling.
Yeah.
It's a very humbling thing to be in the position of asking. And it's the way that we do it. If there was a better way, I would sign up for it today. Put me on the list to do deputation in a different way. It's not the deputation process is a wonderful tool of learning. Our faith has grown. My wife and I have seen God do wonderful things. It's amazing to have a spot in the schedule where you're in a certain part of the country and you need to fill the schedule, and you perhaps you call, send email after email, and you don't get anything, and you go and pray and say, Lord, if we had something, we would gladly be in this service, in this area, and if not, we'll be obedient to you. We're going to church somewhere, and it's not in my best option personally to just drop into a church. Honestly, for me, I feel as if I have failed, because I'm trying to fill that schedule.
Sure.
And if I stop somewhere uninvited, I failed to book a service on deputation. And so perhaps the Lord is working on my pride in that area to just humble me in a place or two. But to see God provide miraculously. We've had a couple of churches, a couple of times where we didn't have a place to go, so we stopped at a church, and it's exactly where we needed to be. I would never have made contact with that pastor just by the means of communication, or didn't really know about the church. Someone told us at the last minute, you should go here, and it's just miraculous how God has worked some things out. And so it's amazing, the journey of faith, even on deputation.
Yeah. So number one, pastor, communication is key. Don't hide behind the secretary if at all possible. Try and get answers to missionaries.
Yeah.
Anything else for a pastor, dear pastor?
Dear pastor, I wish I had posted on a website my protocol for missionary prospects.
Okay.
Every church does it differently, how they bring missionaries in.
Mm-hmm.
Some, the pastor meets missionaries and he asks them to come. Some only bring missionaries for a mission conference. Mm-hmm. Some only support missionaries who come in at their mission conference. Some never book any missionaries. They only do drop-ins. If a missionary stops by, they will maybe give a love offering and, hey, brother, we're praying for you. If God leads us to, we'll support you down the way. So there's a whole range of scheduling.
Sure. And
then just response. And some of that is just pastoral personality, and maybe sometimes even generational idiosyncrasies. And so I'll stop there because I'm not as young, I'm not as old as some old elderly. How should I put that? You'll have to edit that out, brother.
So obviously you're kind of caught in between here. You don't want to scold the older.
No,
but,
absolutely not. Dear pastor, I wish I had learned every missionary child's name. When we support a missionary, it is so important that we pray for them. And it's easy to pray for we would call their name, the last name in the field, but to personalize that and to call the children's names. And because if you know the children's names, you have had to take some time to look at that prayer card or that prayer letter, and you read that prayer letter and you're going to be more in tune with the missionaries that your church supports, and knowing them by name and finding out what are some of the direct needs that they have. And the last one that I wrote in that, dear pastor, I wish I had approached missionaries before they approached me. It's an awkward situation. Being my personality, just from my background, I'm not greatly intimidated in environments, but again, it's a humbling thing to go to a pastor and to introduce yourself as a missionary, because in the back of the mind, oh, here's a missionary, they're looking for support. And I hate to say that, but that's exactly what everyone's thinking.
Yeah.
And so I wish that I had gone to them. Hey, brother, what's your name? Where you going? Can I get a prayer card? I'll be praying for you. I wish I had done that.
You take that burden off of them.
You take it off of them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
yes, sir.
Good. And so we're going to switch roles here real quick.
Yes, sir.
So this is Dear Pastor, I wish had. Now it's Dear Missionary, I now know.
Yes, dear missionary. So this was like a scattergun of thoughts that I had. Dear missionary, please be patient with me. I had 6 other missionaries call before you. Honestly, you get on a call list and you will receive sometimes 10 or 15 calls in a week. Mm-hmm. And that's on top of everything else that you're doing as a pastor. You can't have all of them, so please be patient. We will return your call. And I tried to return every call that a missionary made to us. I'm sure some slipped through the cracks somewhere, but you want to please be patient. Please be patient. I will return your call if you'll just give me some time. Dear missionary, I spent all day yesterday at the hospital, and today I'm locked in on studying for Sunday. Sundays never stop for a pastor. Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, a Bible study that you're doing, or a class that you're teaching, or a discipleship class. There's always something to prepare for, and there are times where as a pastor, you have to pull away from the phone. You have to pull away from people and focus on the Word of God. You have your church to feed. So just because I didn't answer the phone and it's Wednesday afternoon, so Wednesday afternoon is the time to call pastors. It's Wednesday afternoon. I spent all day Monday and Tuesday with a family. A loved one was dying. We had a funeral. I didn't focus on anything. Now I'm focused on the Word of God. So just be patient with us. Dear missionary, I will not feel your full burden. God has called you, and God has placed a burden of that people or that country on you. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to feel that full burden. But if you can transfer a portion of that to me, if I can feel your heart, you are more likely to get support than if you, and it's not necessarily emotions, but you can tell someone who has the burden of a people or a place on them.
As a pastor, what were some things that stand out in your mind when you think about missionaries that you supported as a church, that, man, they did transfer the burden? What was it that they did to help with that?
And someone who has an interest in people, it's so going into, as a missionary now on deputation, going into churches. Some weeks my wife and I, last fall, we were in 4 and 5 churches a week.
Wow.
And that's 4 or 5 pastors, 4 or 5 assistant pastors, 4 or 5 sets of ushers, 4 or 5 youth groups, 4 or 5 congregations, 4 or 5 different service styles and varieties. I mean, these are all people that believe like us and practice like us, but everyone does things differently. Sure. If you've traveled in churches at all, you know that. And so when you come in, you as a missionary, you have to put yourself out there. And it's like this. I would explain this to our young people in the youth group. In the old days, when a man would wear a sword, the sword, the right hand is that protection of that sword. This is your protection. So when you extend your hand, you have opened yourself up. You have exposed yourself to them. And when you expose yourself, you place yourself in a bit of danger or a precarious situation. It's like extending the hand to someone and smiling. You might not get a good response back.
Yeah.
But just being approachable and approaching people, it's difficult going into a lot of different churches and different environments and different philosophies, different ministries. Yes, we might have already been in 4 churches this week, but this one right here matters. And my wife and I, we try to pour ourselves into that service and into those people as if they're the only one. And someone who is aloof, a missionary who is aloof from people or standoff, honestly, I wonder, how will they relate on the field? So that's a long answer to a simple question. Someone who really just cares about people and invests even in the young people in our congregation, tries to learn a name or two, tries to engage. You think, okay, they're going to make it happen wherever they go because they're ministers. They're ministers.
So despite deputation being go, 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 the missionary needs to stop,
Yes.
stop
and take the time to learn a name. I don't want to say I just said it 3 times. We want to be interested in people and invest in people. There are, how many college students do you have currently, roughly?
100,
100 college students. When one asks me a question, there's an attempt made to ask, now what's your name? Where are you from? I can't remember all of them. But it's not just a game, but to be genuinely interested in that individual. This might be the only conversation that this individual and I ever have. So if I will take the time to at least ask their name and repeat their name to them, and then converse with them, what impact can we make on people's lives with something so small as that, just repeating their name to them? So just be interested in people. And that comes through. That comes through even without saying it does. People know if you care or not.
That's good. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I appreciate the counsel that you gave us concerning this transition that you've gone through from pastor to missionary prospect on deputation, and just some of the realities. We're 2 worlds that are entirely separate from each other. Sometimes they collide.
Yes, and then cross.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's our great privilege. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much.
It's our honor.
And catch us on our YouTube channel for our other episodes. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and also check the audio-only platforms as well.